why we hire them. We turn professionals when we need someone to rely on, to trust, and sometimes even to stake our life on. Danny Kosak had the trust of Midlands Television Studios on June 29, 2017, and he violated that trust when he brought a violent, untrained chimpanzee into the courtroom, into the television studio. Today, you will see messages between Danny Kosak and MTS outlining the appearance of his chimpanzee Elias on the television show Midlands After Dark belonging to MTS. You will learn the desperation Danny Kosak felt for the job that she was trying to save and for how little time she felt she had to prepare, even though MTS given them a full month between invitation and Elias's appearance on Midlands Television Studio. After the show was canceled, MTS suffered harm from loss of profits, and Danny Kosak is financially responsible for that harm. As the plaintiff, the burden is upon us to prove by preponderance of the evidence that Danny Kosak had a legal duty and was negligent by not doing the proper thing by training Elias properly and by not making sure that it was safe in the television studio, that Elias would not pose danger to anyone in the room. And that as a result of Danny Kosak's carelessness, there was an attack and MTS suffered harm by having to close down their show, and Danny Kosak is financially responsible for that harm. Today, the plaintiff will call upon 3 witnesses. First, we will call Alex Grace, a party representative of MTS who was there on the day of the attack and will tell you about the events that unfolded. She will reveal how Danny Kosak was desperate to get on the show and just how far Danny Kosak would go to do anything to save her sanctuary. She will tell you how MTS took every step to ensure that they would have a safe and functioning television rehearsal and then taping. Next, you will hear from Hunter Cooper, who will tell you, an active fan of MTS, who will tell you how he was there on the day and witnessed the attack, and will tell you how MTS took every instruction they were told to prevent something like what ensued from happening. And lastly, you will hear from Dr. Willoughby Hawkins, who was the expert hired by MTS to extrapolate on just how far Danny Kosak had taken his training of Elias in the wrong direction. Mr. Hawkins will bring to light just how inappropriate Danny Kosak bringing Elias on the television show was based on Elias's gender, age, and training practice. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will see, due to the overwhelming case evidence and the witnesses, which the plaintiff will provide, that Danny Kosak was not right in bringing Elias onto the television set of Midlands After Dark. He was an inadequate professional and did not know best, even though he was supposed to. The tragedy of Chris Villafana's death did not end with Chris Villafana's death. It ended with a popular television show being canceled and hundreds of people out of work. At the end of today, my co-counsel, Kelly Navickas, will ask you to find the defendant, Danny Kosak, liable.
Thank you. Counsel. Defense counsel?
Yes. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'm going to talk to you today about danger. You know, heart racing, goosebumps, sweat on the brow, danger. You have a knife thrower tossing cutlery at his lovely assistant. Yeah, some people would be interested in the show, but put a blindfold on him, and a lot more people would be inclined to sit in. And it's that extra seat that MTS feeds on. Ratings. It's all about the ratings. And that's the mindset that Alex Grace, the host of Midlands After Dark, kept in order to keep her show afloat and relevant. Even if that meant cutting corners, bypassing warnings, feelings, and disregarding some safety guidelines about a chimpanzee that could and did kill someone. But hey, more readings, right? And that's the dangerous mindset that has infected all NTS staff. That's negligence. Failure to behave with the level of care that someone of ordinary prudence would exercise under the same circumstances. And because of that negligence, Danny Kosak has lost not only his best friend, but animals in need at his shelter, and a promising career. You will hear from 3 witnesses today. My client, Danny Kosak, who will tell you about his rigorous training and experience with animals on television. Second, you will hear from Remy Hollis, who will illustrate the lack of care exhibited by Midlands After Dark. And last, you will hear from Ashley Thornhill, who will give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of Alex Grace's habitual unethical desire for ratings and the extent on the day of the attack. This is a scale, ladies and gentlemen. We don't need 100% or 75%, but nearly 51% for the preponderance of evidence to weigh on our side. And if you feel that that evidence has been shown today, then I have done my job. Mr. Kosak brought a safe, well-trained animal to set that day. And the only reason why this tragedy has happened, and why we are here today, is because NTS chose to value ratings over the safety of their staff. And after hearing the overwhelming evidence today, you will support that claim. Thank you.
Thank you. Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Plaintiff calls Alex Grace to the stand.
Will you swear the witness, or do you want us to?
Sorry.
Will you swear the witness, or do you want us to?
Oh, you should.
Ms. Grace, please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're going to give here today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes,
You may proceed.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Alex Grace.
And where do you work currently?
I work at MTS. I'm an executive producer.
How long have you been working in entertainment?
Well, I've been doing Broadway shows straight out of high school. I've also worked behind the scenes and as an executive producer. I think it's safe to say that I live and breathe the entertainment industry.
What do you do currently at MTS?
I have my own show. It's a late night talk show called Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. It's one of their most popular shows.
And what did you do as an executive at MTS?
I was responsible for overseeing talent and writing scripts. So my team and I found local talent to interview and also worked on scripts. That's how I first started speaking to Danny Kosak.
Who is Danny Kosak?
Danny Kosak's an animal trainer and handler, and he prepares animals for public appearances in Midlands.
When did you first speak to Danny Kosak before his appearance?
Well, Mr. Kosak had been emailing me in 2016 quite a few times, but I'd never heard of him before, so I just ignored it. But it was only until recently when an intern showed me a video of his that had gone viral called Who's Gonna Eat with Elias or something, and I thought it would be good publicity for the show, so I decided to invite him on the show.
And you communicated with him via email previous to the performance, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Would you recognize that email exchange if I were to show it to you?
Yes, I would.
Like the record reflect when I'm approaching the defense counsel, permission to approach the defense counsel?
Yes, record may so reflect you may.
Which previously we marked as Exhibit 6. Yeah, personally.
Of course.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff enters Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, to a proper character.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, and proper evidence.
How is it improper?
I refrain my objection, Your Honor.
So no objection? Okay. So it is so admitted.
Your Honor. Kozak say to you on January 8th in his email?
Mr. Kozak said that he really needed to be on the show and that he would literally do anything to be on there. I think it was pretty clear that he was desperate to be on the show.
And did you respond to this email?
Yes, of course, I connected him to my talent booker, Jameson Cloud, but also told him that if he had any questions, he could reach out to me directly if he'd like.
What was the next step to have Danny Kozak on your show?
Well, he sent me a list of safety guidelines to follow that everyone on set should follow, so I received those and read through them.
Would you recognize those guidelines if I were to show them to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Let the record reflect that I am approaching the defense counsel, who has previously been marked as Exhibit 23, the guidelines. May I approach the bench?
Of course.
Exhibit 23.
Exhibit 23, is there any objection to the admissibility of this exhibit?
No.
Thank you. Exhibit so admitted.
Did you let your staff know about these guidelines?
Yes, of course. I let them know that Mr. Kozak was going to be appearing on the show with a chimp, and I told them that they should all follow these guidelines.
And are you sure that they read them?
Yes, I forwarded the handout to them.
Next, I'd like to talk about you talking to Danny Kozak previous to the show. Did you talk to him previous to him coming on the show? Like, when he arrived, did you speak to him?
Yes, yes, he was in the dressing room. I went in to greet him, and he thanked me profusely for inviting him on the show, and he even hugged me. And then we went on to speak about what we would do on the performance. He suggested that he would go off stage for a bit, and that Elias and I would have a bit.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay? She's,
Yeah, no,
She's-
state the basis for
Mhm.
your objection.
she was speaking about what her and Danny were talking about.
This is a statement by a party opponent. She had the conversation with Danny Kozak.
Is the conversation have anything to do with the merits of your lawsuit? Is it relevant to proving your case, and how?
Miss Grace is just going through the motions of the fact that she talked to Danny Kozak before and made sure that everything was safe. We're simply painting a picture rather than proving a point.
Okay. I'll give you some leeway on that, so whatever communications between the parties need to be relevant to the claim that you're proving. So
Yes, sir.
I'll give you some leeway, I'll overrule the objection. Thank you.
Miss Grace, where was the chimp at this time?
The chimp was in his cage. He looked a little agitated to me, and he was even screaming a little bit.
And did Mr. Kozak react to this?
Well, I asked Mr. Kozak why the chimp was making such a fuss, but Mr. Kozak just looked at me and kind of aggressively said that there was nothing to worry about and that Elias would calm down eventually. I took Mr. Kozak to be a professional, and I didn't know better, so I took his word for it.
Miss Grace, let's go back to before Mr. Kozak arrived. Did you take any other precautionary measures besides looking at the guidelines?
Yes, of course. When Mr. Kozak emailed me the safety guidelines, I became even more cautious of having a live animal on set. So, since it was our first time as well, so I actually consulted an article that is widely regarded as the leading authority of dealing with animals on set, and I also consulted 5 experts prior to Mr. Kozak's appearance on our show.
Would you recognize this article if I were to show them to you?
Yes, I would.
Let the record reflect that I am approaching the defense counsel that has been previously marked as Exhibit 14. Thank you. May I approach the bench?
Of course.
Exhibit 14.
Any objection to Exhibit 14?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. It is so admitted.
You also mentioned that let me rephrase. You followed this article,
Yes, absolutely.
and you also mentioned that you consulted 5 experts. What did they have to say?
Well, they all said that as long as we followed these guidelines and that the chimp was properly trained, then there would be no problem.
Let's go to the rehearsal. When did it begin?
I think around 2 p.m. I was 20 minutes late, but the signs were posted and the lights were on and everything was ready to go.
And when you arrived, how did the first part of the rehearsal go?
Well, I was doing my opening monologue, so Chris could see if the content was correct, and then Danny and Elias were on stage for a bit doing an introductory segment before Mr. Kozak left the stage, and Elias and I were doing our bit.
And who is Chris?
Chris Viafana was one of our writers, and he was checking if the content was right. He was also the victim of Elias's attack, and we all miss him deeply.
Miss Grace, how did the interview with Elias Only go?
Well, it was going fine at first. We were having conversation, and Danny was showing hand signals to Elias to respond, and it was all okay at first until suddenly Elias just started screeching, and it was awful.
What did you do when this happened?
Well, I just froze. There's nothing I could do. I'm not a professional animal handler.
And what happened after that?
And I looked to Mr. Kozak to do something, but Elias was just screeching up and down, and then he ran at Chris Viafana, and I looked at Kozak again and said, do something, but Mr. Kozak just stood there while one of his animals mauled my riders to death.
And what did you do during the attack?
Well, I dove under my desk because I value my life, and there was just so much screaming happening everywhere, the chimps, and Chris was screaming, and I was really scared.
What happened after the attack?
Well, I hid under my desk until the police arrived, and then I answered some of their questions.
And what happened to the show after the attack?
Well, it was put on an immediate hiatus, which in our industry usually means cancellation, and that's exactly what happened. We got so much negative publicity from this incident that we couldn't even broadcast a farewell special for Chris, which we would have really liked to do.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ready to cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Grace. Isn't it true that your 2013 film, Locking Leo, bombed in America at the box office?
I guess you could say so.
And your first show, PBS, Cooking with Grace, wasn't that also canceled due to low ratings?
Yes, that is right.
Objection, relevance.
Go ahead.
Okay. If heard in my opening, the ratings are relevance, it also shows what her motivations were going forward with Midlands After Dark.
Objection overruled.
So, going to Midlands After Dark, in 2017, you saw the lowest ratings in the show's history, is that correct?
Yes, but ratings go up and down, and if it wasn't for this incident, ratings were going to go up.
Yes, Grace. So, moving on, you saw videos of Elias and the Hound Dogs, and you claimed those to be ratings gold, correct?
Yes, I'm a businesswoman. It's my job to bring good publicity to the show.
So, going to Elias being on the show, isn't it true that Danny Kozak also offered you other animals, like a cockatoo, a small bird, and you denied them?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So, with those guidelines that he offered you for Elias, that you booked for the show, did you make sure that your staff read those guidelines?
I sent them the guidelines.
Did you make sure, as the host of the show, as an owner of the show, that they read them to make for their safety?
Well, when I send something to my team, they read it. I don't think it's my job to follow up with them about every single thing.
Okay, that's great. Would you say that you're an avid drinker?
I wouldn't put it that way.
Objection, relevance.
If allowed to continue, I can show them.
Okay, you're going to lay a foundation for this?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll withhold ruling on the motion pending a proper foundation for it.
So, with the death of Chris Viafana, you wrote his wife a letter of condolence, correct?
Yes, that is right. Chris was a beloved employee at MTS.
Permission to approach the witness with exhibit
You may.
20. Yes. recognize the handwriting of this letter and the signature at the bottom?
Yes, it looks like my handwriting.
Is this a letter to Chris's wife, Harper Villapana?
Yes, that's right.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not to my knowledge.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the document?
Yes.
And you, just for confirmation, you did write that?
Yes, I think so.
Permission to enter the 20 into evidence?
Yes. Any objection to it?
Yes, Your Honor, improper characteristics.
Yeah,
That's fine.
go ahead.
That's fine. So, Your Honor, for improper character, it's to show more prejudicial than probative, but Alex Grace makes statements in there that are definitely more probative than prejudicial. She also makes statements showing negligence on her behalf, so it's definitely more probative.
And so is the evidence being introduced to prove negligence
Yes,
or to
right.
prove character?
To prove negligence.
What's the basis of your objection?
Well, since they were on a line of a character attack, I would assume that they would enter the note, which has nothing to do with Ms. Grace's alleged drinking problem. It has more to do with how she addressed the aftermath of the attack and the loss that Ms. Harper suffered.
Yeah, what about that? Like, we started with something about drinking too much. And so I withheld on ruling on that pending a foundation for the introduction of that evidence. Does this have to do with the drinking?
If I can lay just a little bit more foundation if you would like.
Does it
Your Honor,
have
at
to-
some point, there has to be like foundation and then question.
Yes, that is true. So does this have to do with the drinking?
She wrote this in a drunken state, nonetheless, she did write it, so, it's really about the letter and the content.
I guess what I'm wondering about is this evidence going to the drinking or is it going to negligence?
Overall negligence.
Okay.
But if she's speculating if it's about the drinking, there's nothing in that note that gives any idea that she could have been under the influence of alcohol.
Like I just said, I'm not speculating about the drinking, I'm speculating about the negligence that she admitted to in the letter.
Okay. So I'll overrule the objection, but you gotta stay on negligence on
Okay,
that.
no problem.
Okay.
Permission to construct a demonstrative? Which one?
Your Honor, may I stand so I can move to see the judge?
Of course, yeah, you remove a lot of it.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Grace, so this is the letter that you wrote to Ms. Villapana after the death of Chris, correct? So I'm gonna highlight 3 statements in this letter, if you read along with me while I read them out. Okay? Okay, first one. That's who I am, was. We know. Maybe if I had listened to rules or said yes to different animal. I don't know, I don't care. Is that what that says?
Yes.
Next statement. I'm sorry, Heather, we could have done way more. Chris could still be alive. Is that what that says?
Yes, but just to be clear, I wrote this letter right after the death of an employee. I was in an emotional state of mind and I wasn't playing the blame game
Oh,
with this letter.
no problem, no problem. But nonetheless, you did say it, correct? Like,
Yes.
said yes to a different animal?
Yes, I think so.
Last statement. I let everyone know. Is that what that says?
Yes, but again, I was just really sad that Chris had died and it was my show, so it was my way of offering my condolences.
Well, according to you, you don't know and you don't care.
Again, it was written in an emotional state of mind.
No problem, Ms. Grace. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Oh, well, yes. Go forward.
Redirect.
None, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, you may step down. Please. Please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Hunter Cooper to the stand. May I proceed?
Cooper, raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give here today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so
Yes.
help you God.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the court.
I'm Hunter Cooper. I'm a screenwriter.
Is that what you do for a living?
Well, it's what I'm trying to do for a living. You know, we're getting there. It's a work in progress. But yes, I am a screenwriter by trade.
Where were you on June 29th, 2017?
On June 29th, I was on the set of Millions After Dark with Alex Grace when that chimp attacked Chris Viafana. Crazy.
Have you visited the set of Midlands After Dark previously?
Oh yes, of course. As I said, I'm an avid screenwriter. What better place to be on the set of a TV show? Nowhere if you ask me. But then again, no one usually does, actually.
And where are you usually situated on set?
Well, I like to get a good view of the show to make sure I'm learning as much as I can. So I usually sit right in the front row, sometimes under the seat, to make sure no one gets in my way.
And do you know who Danny Kosak is?
Yes, I do know who Danny Kosak is.
How do you know him?
Well, when I was on set that day, I overheard that he was Elias's handler, that chimp that I mentioned earlier.
And what did you see happening on set before the rehearsal on June 29th, 2017?
Nothing out of the ordinary. It was a normal day on a TV set. Hustle and bustle of staff moving around tables, producers talking about the show. Nothing strange.
And did you see Danny Kosak on set?
Yes, I did see Danny Kosak.
And what was Danny Kosak doing?
Danny Kosak was making a bit of a fuss. He was complaining to craft services about the location of the table with the chicken wings on it and just kind of being unpleasant.
And what happened after that?
After that, Danny Kosak, he just kept pacing back and forth in the studio, mumbling to himself. I heard him say, maybe it's too soon. He just seemed very, very nervous.
And what was the staff doing during this time?
The staff was super receptive to anything Ms. Kosak asked. They went and moved the craft services table as soon as possible.
Let's talk about what happened during the rehearsal. How did it start?
Well, it started per usual. Alex Grace gave a phenomenal opening monologue. She's such a great actress. And then after that, Danny Kosak came on stage with Elias the Chimp.
And what happened after that?
Well, they started their interview bit, and Danny Kosak left Alex Grace alone on stage with Elias and went off to stand where the writers were standing.
What did the chimp do?
Well, it started off normal, but then the chimp just went nuts, stood up on his chair and started screaming. No one really knew what to do.
And what happened after that?
After that, Elias the Chimp charged straight at Danny Kosak, ran right off stage. Unfortunately, Chris Viafana was standing in between Danny and Elias, and after that, Elias just went straight for Chris, and it got very bloody very fast.
What had Chris been doing before the attack?
Absolutely nothing. He just was unfortunate enough to be standing in between that chimp and Danny Kosak.
Did you hear Danny Kosak ask Chris to move at any point?
Not once. Danny Kosak just stood there and watched Elias maul Chris to death.
What happened after the attack?
Well, after that, the ambulance finally came, and fortunately it was too late for Chris. I heard Elias was put down after.
Did you attend Chris Viafana's funeral?
Yes, as a screenwriter, I just was heartbroken by the loss of another person in the industry.
And who else did you see at that funeral?
Well, I saw Harper Viafana, who was Chris's wife. I also saw Danny Kosak there.
Did Danny Kosak approach Harper Viafana?
Yes, Danny Kosak did approach Harper at the funeral.
What did he say to her?
I overheard Danny tell Harper that she was sorry. Danny was sorry.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may, this is a statement by a party opponent at best, it's not hearsay.
Overruled.
Of course. What did Danny Kosak say to Ms. Viafana?
Right, so Danny Kosak approached Harper Viafana at the funeral and told her that he was so sorry about what happened and that he never should have been away from Elias for something that was too new to the chimp.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. May I begin?
You may.
Now, Ms. Cooper, you're a big fan of Miss Grace, correct?
Yes, I'm a fan of the industry.
All right. And you attend all of her shows, correct?
Yes, of course, as I said, I'm an aspiring screenwriter. What better place to be in on set of such a wonderful show?
Objection. Relevance?
Your Honor, relevance is a low bar, and I'm merely laying the foundation for evidence I'm about to enter. But you weren't actually allowed on the set, are you?
I mean, no one stopped me, so I assumed I was allowed.
Yes, but you aren't allowed anywhere near Miss Grace, are you?
I mean, if we want to get technical, sure, but again, as I said, no one at MTS tried to stop me, so I assumed it was all good.
Now, you have a restraining order against you from Miss Grace, isn't that correct, Ms. Cooper?
I guess you could call it that. I don't even think it's still in effect anymore. We kind of forgot about that.
Objection, Your Honor, improper character evidence.
Your Honor, the point of our case is negligence. This goes to show that MTS was negligent in keeping the set free of any guests that should not have been there that day. In particular, Ms. Cooper, whose restraining order was still effective until July 31st, 2018. This attack happened June 29th of 2018. She should not have been there. She should not have been anywhere within.
Objection, Your Honor, this.
500 feet. This is not going to show character evidence, Your Honor. This is going to show negligence on the part of MTS.
Even if it is, even if it is negligence, it's not relevant to the truth of the matter asserted. We're talking about whether MTS was negligent for the death of Chris Fiafana, not for the presence of Hunter Cooper on the set.
Your Honor, if I may respond to that?
Yes.
Your Honor, according to one of these guidelines that opposing counsel has previously entered, specifically Art Exhibit number 23, if you may, here it is, Your Honor. Number
Your Honor, if I may, regardless of the argument my brother counsel is asserting here, this is still improper character evidence because this is more prejudicial than probative. They're trying to bias the jury against MTS and Alex Grace.
What do you say to that, to the balancing test of prejudicial versus relevance?
Your Honor, for more prejudicial than probative, it has to be substantially more prejudicial than probative. And I believe that it's up to the jury to decide whether this would be substantially more prejudicial than probative. Second, Your Honor, this goes to, Your Honor, it's not the fact that, Your Honor,